Okay.
That is
Wash
I
your
love
hand.
Alava.
that is striking.
Wash your hand and don't touch your face.
That's right. Wash your hand and not touch
They
your
had
face.
They
Okay.
had the thing with the CDC guy was on TV saying you should wash your hand, don't touch your face, in the on the press thing, and he's in the background doing this.
Is he really?
And it's in the background, right?
Yeah.
And then the Minister of Health comes on. You know, it's very simple. Just be disciplined. Wash your hands and don't touch your face. And he's doing this, you know. And the eyes are the sponge, right, to the face, right? Everyone, without
Didn't he
exception.
also get sick?
No, that was
Oh,
the
yeah?
Iranian thing.
Is it
The
on?
US guys.
Oh.
Okay.
These are US guys.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's start. Actually, something this morning came up which is very interesting. Is that is the media actually controlling the narrative of the people, and the political systems that we have allows even individually elected officials to render their own opinion. You know, ironically, we all think that when you elect your representative, when it goes that belong to, let's say, left or right, they basically vote what they think is good for their constituents. Then I saw these dreamers disrupting Pelosi's talk, Nancy Pelosi, which is the basically
Speaker of the House.
Speaker of the House, and these dreamers, which are between 15 to 25, jammed the session, and they were shouting at her and repeating stuff. And he said, look, why is this happening? Because these guys are basically lock, stock, and barrel left. And why they disrupting their own thing? They wouldn't allow her to even talk. And they forced her to leave. Imagine.
Why do they do that? I didn't hear about
Because
it.
they're
No,
betrayed by the very people who say they're going to help.
That's right. So what I found out, I was trying to dig in, why is this happening? Because this is their own base.
Where
The
was
whole system is trying to kick
This
out
is in
immigrants.
Los Angeles.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So then I found out that what Democrats do, the way the finance laws, the fundraising laws work is that only the Speaker of the House, whether minority speaker or majority speaker, the Vice President, and few other people are exempt from donation, large donations of more than $1,000. I don't know exactly the numbers. So what happens is this: to bypass the systems, what donors that want to donate large amount. Oh, another one is the chairman of the parties are exempt from receiving large donation. So what they do, these special interest groups funnel the money to the speaker. And guess what? Speaker decides, first of all, they have seats that they elect. Obviously, there are certain seats, like 20-30% of the seats are in jeopardy, usually, right? So they don't spend any money on the seats that they already have. They don't spend any money on those. Now they take those money, and normally they take the money that it's funneled through this loophole through the basically Speaker of the House, funneled to those areas that basically are toss up or in jeopardy. But the problem is that now they control the guy that is getting elected. That means that they put their own Democratic Party, their own basically representative to bid to get in, not people's bid. That means that if you're a moderate Democrat, for example, in Los Angeles, and you want to put your your name to run, you have no chance of getting
Any
elected.
funding from your own
Be-
party.
Right? There is no funding. Not only there is no funding, they go against you.
But there
So-
aren't disruptors who have won. For example, the AOC lady.
Yeah, those are
Cortez.
minimal. But let me
Tokens.
let's go a little bit further. It's just intriguing. Now, when they get elected, they can't vote their own conscience at all. That's why now you see Democratic Party on any subject, they vote as a bloc. That means that the vote of people
Means nothing.
means
By the
nothing.
speaker.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's the same with the Republicans. They're doing
No, I know, but the point I was trying to make is slightly different. That means that the process of the two-party representative working for the people of United States is gone. It's no longer valid.
They're working for themselves.
Now, going back to the original thing is that Trump was saying that I can sign the Dreamers tomorrow. It's Democrats that are blocking it because they're padding it up with all the stuff that they want and they're preventing from Dreamers to get their legal status. So they're now basically stuff is bubbling up and Democrats now they're realizing that they have no vote whatsoever. It's the machinery of Democratic Party that makes decisions, not individual members
Wow.
at all.
Like, if
And-
you're also to see on Facebook, this guy, just someone like us, goes to Mexico, shows us that they have checkpoints set in place, funded by our government, by the way, to keep people from moving north. This happened maybe
Wow.
15 years ago. It started 10 years ago, and it got ramped up more and more and more until recently, when
Right.
they literally said after the new president, "Oh, we're not going to do it anymore." So the whole rush of people who were previously being blocked systematically through Mexico, it just rushed up because they heard the news that those barriers were put down.
Well, that
But no
was
one knew about
Democratic
these-
Party. Was
But no one knew about this. No
Okay.
one knew about these barriers that were put up.
There were barriers to block people from coming
Like
up?
literally,
No,
government
right now-
officials,
no,
government
no,
officials
but-
would have checkpoints who would deport you from Mexico from coming to the United States.
Uh-huh.
If you told them you're
Oh,
coming
from the
to
Mexican side.
from Guatemala,
Oh, I see, I
Honduras,
see.
whatever country you're from, they were trying to come here for like a decade, and they were being blocked.
Pushed back before they get to the border.
Yes,
Because
and then
we
after
were
the change
providing the
in
resources for that. But
yeah,
we stopped providing
but
the resources.
Trump,
after
because
his
of
presidency
tariffs,
started.
yeah, he said no. It's recently, by a
But
couple of
after
months
his
ago.
presidency started, you remember the rocky
Yeah, yeah,
relationship
yeah.
with Mexico.
Right.
After this all happened, all those barriers came down.
But right now, National Guards of Mexico is blocking actually people coming in. Now they have guns. Anyways,
well,
so
finally,
this
again, we
was
started doing it.
yeah, this was very interesting from a political point of view. Is that process of the basically consultation and collaboration to solve economic problem has gone out the door, and now you're having basically two blocks
It's a free for all.
of they're against each other and their members cannot decide what to push and what not to push. On top of it, the majority basically Speaker of the House has power to even block the laws to come to floor to get voted. So whoever has the power basically kills.
And it starts in the House.
Right.
The Senate can't form a law and pass it. It has to pass the House first.
Right.
So that's very, very powerful.
You can pass a law in the Senate first as well. It's just it has to be passed by both houses.
Both houses. He goes back up.
Yeah.
Anyways, but it's
So it's a
intriguing how
Senate bill
corrupt it has
and a House
become.
bill.
And all of it is because of this the laws for basically donations.
It's interesting because the
called
Baha'i concept, you can't donate. You can't advertise, you can't promote, you can't, the solution is there. How do you get that out? Nobody's
No,
gonna
no, the
attack it.
solution is not that. The financing of the basically delegates is different issue. What we read from beginning to now is that when a person gets elected, they have to basically disassociate themselves,
Right.
and they have to basically vote their conscience and what is good for all people, not the people that they elected them. And this concept doesn't exist
It's
at
a
all.
business. Politics in the U.S. is a business now.
No,
You got
I
no
know,
way
but
you're
it's
Sweden, you can't pay more
polarized.
than $30,000 as a politician.
15 years ago.
Except for prostitution, it's the oldest business.
That's
Well,
right.
yeah.
There's a problem inherent though. If someone does go by their mind, not only do they get punished by their supposed party leadership, like you just clearly mentioned they have the power to do, they get punished by practically everyone for actually going by their conscience. I mean, they really get vilified, and it's something that's very difficult to go about
Well,
doing.
that's because of the media. Media is corrupt as well. That's the
yes.
reason.
There was a man who once said, "Show me the man, and I'll give you the crime."
Yeah, that's what's happening. All right, let's go read on. What page are we at? 100 and something?
Oh,
It's 107?
I have a bookmark at 104, 105. The cat and the dog.
Okay, let's start with 105, among those matters. Somebody wants to read?
Among those matters which require thorough revision and reform is the method of studying the various branches of knowledge and the organization of the academic curriculum. From lack of organization, education has become haphazard and confused. Trifling subjects which should not call for elaboration receive undue attention to such an extent that students over long periods of time waste their minds and their energies on material that is pure supposition, in no way susceptible of proof. Such study consisting in going deep into statements and concepts which careful examination would establish as not even unlikely, but rather an unalloyed superstition, and representing the investigation of useless conceits and the chasing of absurdities. There can be no doubt that to concern oneself with such illusions, to examine into and lengthily debate such idle propositions is nothing but a waste of time and a marring of the days of one's life. Not only this, but it also prevents the individual from undertaking the study of those arts and sciences of which society stands in dire need. The individual should, prior to engaging in the study of any subject, ask himself what its uses are, and what fruit and result will derive from it. If it is a useful branch of knowledge, that is, if society will gain important benefits from it, then he should certainly pursue it with all of his heart. If not, if it consists in empty, profitless debates and in a vain concatenation of imaginings that lead to no result except acrimony, why devote one's life to such useless hair splittings and disputes?
Okay, so he's referring that there was no educational system in Iran at the time to educate children and adults, and mostly they were madrasas that were teaching Quran, and generally and jurisprudence that came out of hadiths. So they were wasting their time to see whether you should enter the bathroom with left leg or right leg.
I remember in the school, I was like, they're telling me put your right leg in. I'm like, what's going on? I didn't know. You have to
serious?
put no.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the students told me, not like the
Yeah.
rule, but I mean, when she said it,
This is
for
in
me
Iran?
it's new. No, in Bahrain, I'm saying.
Bahrain.
No, I'm
No,
saying.
no,
like,
in Iran also,
What I'm
they-
saying,
it's-
it happened to me in experience. like a
I'm-
girl told me.
I went to Christian school, so I don't know none of that.
Yeah, but anyways, the whole point,
Wow.
remember, you're talking about mid-1800s, and
Ah,
there
I
was
see.
no but there are debates today in Iran regarding hadith and describing basically behavior of humans, or whether you're when you're going relieving yourself, you should be directed toward which area. I'm not kidding.
It's painful to hear that we come from that culture. It really is. It really is. I mean, I don't blame people to judge us the way they do. Just ridiculous. Guys licking the mosque's nogre, silver, on
Yeah,
the
licking in Iran.
in
licking
Iran,
something.
and I mean, people
wall.
look at that and it really is sad.
21st century.
Because it's
No, the
all-
problem is those crooked clergy people that are propagating this superstition and extraordinary power that is, they are custodian of that power. And that's how could you sell words and make a living out of it? And that's what they do. They don't do anything. So that's how they make a living. They create followers and cults of their own, and they milk people. And now that they have power, they're financed, completely financed by the government, by the taxpayer. It's amazing that their Hosseiniye, which is basically center of learning, used to be dilapidated, these very old places. Now, it's a Taj Mahal. You go in there, you see chandeliers, you see Italian tiles and all sorts of things. They're people are dying from hunger on the streets, and these guys their budget is increasing every year because now they have the control.
It's like a slavery, is it not? I mean, you have a country that you can actually have
Yeah, there are
infinite production.
It's the 80 million people are hostage of about 2,000, 3,000 people that are controlling the whole process.
That happens in general across the board in all the governmental systems, though. I mean, really, you've got about 50 million homeless here in America, so you have over 350 million total. Now, the ratio is a little bit less, but it's still, the degree is still there.
No, you don't die from a corner of the street from disease. You have 20% of population there are addicted. The prostitution is legalized. Nowhere in the world you have governments involved in clergy involved in prostitution. I mean,
There might be a guy in Las Vegas.
no. You're talking about
The ecclesiastical structure.
ecclesiastical structure is in process. Actually, they're saying 90% of hotels in Mashhad, which is the center of the Shia Imam Reza, 90% of them are basically brothel houses, and they rent the room by the hour, basically.
So you're specifically referring to
Shia
the state
Islam.
of the government and how it's involved with the religious organizations.
Right. Government gives license to the clergy to run, to basically issue
Open and notorious.
temporary marriage licenses. The clergy does that, and government give them permission to do that.
And so
Well, that's how
the,
they
the
justify the
standpoint, the
prostitution.
issue
Yeah.
is that it's legal.
Really?
Yeah, it's legal. yeah.
Whereas everywhere else in the world, it's illegal, and so it's shunned
Right.
from that capacity.
Now you're looking at, for example, the second issue relates to basically drugs of abuse, trafficking, which the branch of government, which is the unofficial army, is trafficking heroin from Afghanistan to
Revolutionary Guard.
Europe. Sorry?
Are you talking about the Revolutionary Guard?
Yeah, Revolutionary Guard.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at
They have
is-
their own courts, they have their own judges. They have their own transportation. No, they don't respond to anybody
Except for the
except
Ayatollah?
the supreme leader.
Interesting.
It's
So,
that's the source of corruption, and this is the reason, as I said, that Baha'i religion doesn't have any clergy, because they know the minute the affairs of the world has to be managed by people of the world, not by supernatural or basically custodian of God on earth. And this is really why,
Self-appointed custodian.
of course. So now this is very, very interesting. And they were saying that the participation of last election, they knew a month before of this coronavirus in Iran, a month before. And because they wanted to make sure that people go to the booths for election, they didn't announce it. That means that the disease was spreading from Tehran all over Iran. I mean, they infected at least hundreds of thousands of people. Now slowly it's coming out. They were showing actually video. People took it of the polling sites in Iran in several cities, and they were all empty. And they were saying 25% of population voted, which is completely false. It's made up. It's just amazing the machinery that they have created is worse than Bolshevik in Russia. I mean, they control everything. You say anything bad about the government. It was funny. A guy went to the morgue, right? They were saying only, this was 3 weeks ago, I think, only something like 20 some people died of this disease. A guy comes in and goes to the morgue, and you see rows and rows of bodies in body bag. That was from Corona. They only dissipate. Another guy says that is against one of the Ayatollahs in Rome were saying they recorded them in the meeting, their own internal meeting, somebody recorded it, that 120 bodies were buried in a mass grave, and this is against Islam. It should have been in each individual. And they say only up to now was only 70 people died. There is one single mass grave had 120 bodies.
Wow.
You see level of corruption, and the
Wait,
guy that
they wanted them, they put them in mass graves as far as
The
getting.
the count was off. They were saying 70 people died. 120 was in just one
mass grave
Can you
in
imagine how
home
many mass
alone.
graves with another
And the
120?
guy, the Ayatollah was complaining why these guys weren't washed based on Islamic thing, and they were buried individually.
Because these are infected.
They were infected, right?
And who's gonna wash someone who's infected?
Well, they also wanted to get rid of the evidence, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But he was saying, announcing it.
Well, he was.
No, this is the funny part.
It's supposed to be
Too much
not
stuff together.
scrutinized. It's
There,
supposed to be
there
not reported.
thousands and thousands have probably died,
Somehow
and
they
they're not
reported it.
saying anything.
We need a Superman. We really need it. The world needs a Superman.
No, you know the funny part is, and this is the funny part, is that
It just needs these books.
No,
that's
no,
it.
no. You
the
need physically
the disease
And I-
penetrated their own political structure. Several of their own basically groups got infected with coronavirus, and they're older people because they've been controlling the country for 40 years, so they're dying off from the parliament,
Over 50, under 15
right?
are affected the most. So if
Yeah,
your children
anyways,
get sick,
but-
you watch how fast they react to it. That's what you gotta do.
Anyway, so now this is the first time that the governing power is paying the price of their own mistakes, because they spread it. They were showing Chinese ayatollahs in Qom. They were importing them to educate them to remember. They're trying to pass this Shia virus to entire world. That's their goal. No, until the entire world becomes Shia, they're not going to stop. So now they imported the virus. I'm not kidding. They had Chinese.
A lot of Chinese goes there and Iranian. They have their thing. Yeah.
They're educating. Now imagine China put 1 million Muslims into a re-education camp to get the garbage out of their head. And these guys are going against, trying to teach them what to do.
Wow.
They're spreading out. They had these people are hungry in Iran, and the money is spent on educating foreigners in Africa, in South America. They have cultural education centers all over the world, financed by blood and tears and hunger of Iranians.
Mm.
It's amazing that a group of people have no country. They think Iran is their
Center of the world.
no. It's Iran. They conquered Iran. They're not Iranian. It's amazing the mentality.
Prison.
Where they're from.
I'm not
These are
following.
those, these are those, this
what
is
you're-
the
what
group
you're
of.
saying.
No, mullahs, they think that they belong to Shia Ummat. That means all the Shiites in the world are one entity. And the grounds that they're in belongs to them. It's their
I understand.
Oh, so
spoil.
they don't have that idea of national.
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
right. He said, no, those people that are against us, we conquered their land. It's ours. They have no right to the land. It's amazing how sick it is.
They're subhuman.
Right.
They don't know better. Just like the colonists did and every other entity that took over other people's
Actually, it
land.
is a form of colonization. It's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
No, of course. That's why it's imploding from inside. This is the first time this supreme leader mentioned that a word called Zu'afa means that people that are being, they're weak and they're being taken advantage of. Now he changed the definition that people are that are taking Zu'afa are not the poor and the people that are hungry. People Zu'afa are the ones that are basically Shiites that are following the Velayat Faqih, this architected political system. Those are the weak and distraught, not anybody that is poor. So now they're saying is that if you don't follow the doctrine, that means that even if you're poor and you've been basically you're not following the structure, you're no longer a valid member of our community. It's amazing. And all this money that the people are donating to these centers all has no accounting. Everything goes into the pocket of the clergy. They can spend it. It's amazing. We have a friend of ours was saying that he lives in Switzerland, and he mentioned that their banker were mentioning that once a month the Swiss bank, one of the vice presidents, goes to Rome and comes back with suitcases of dollars. Suitcases of dollars putting in their name into the Swiss banks.
That's what I use. I get John Frank.
Yeah.
Why was physical money? Why don't they just wire money?
Well,
Because
United
it's
States
track.
blocked that. That's the reason.
Interesting.
It's illegal money that is. Anyways, let's read on. We had enough. So this is the condition that they were talking about, that people are not pursuing sciences or arts because there is only madrasas in Iran at the time, and they were wasting people's time following the Sharia and discussing
They were
things that-
brainwashing clinics.
of course. And this is very interesting process. All right, let's read on. Because
This matter requires further elucidation and a thorough hearing, so that it can be fully established that some of the subjects which today are neglected are extremely valuable, while the nation has no need whatever of various others superfluous studies, the point will, God willing, be developed in a second volume. Our hope is that a reading of this first volume will produce fundamental changes in the thinking and the behavior of society, for we have undertaken the work with a sincere intent and purely for the sake of God. Although in this world individuals who are able to distinguish between sincere intentions and false words are as rare as the philosopher's stone, yet we fix our hopes on the measureless bounties of the Lord. To resume, as for that group who maintains that in effecting these necessary reforms, we must proceed with deliberation, exercise patience, and gain the objectives one at a time. Just what do they mean by this? If by deliberation they are referring to the circumspection which the science of government requires, their thought is timely and appropriate. It is certain that momentous undertakings cannot be brought to a successful conclusion in haste, that in such cases haste would only make waste. The world of politics.
Could
Yeah.
you explain a couple of things here? Because I'm
Sure.
kind of paused and I'm not understanding what else you're reading because I'm
I'm
up.
having a hard time reading it because I'm trying to process it at the same time.
Bottom of 106, it says that there's a second volume. So was Abdul Baha planning on making a second book?
the question really was why basically branches of education that exist in the world, whether it's medicine, whether it's physics, whether it's mathematics, whether it's basically social sciences, none of those are pursued and had any structure, formal structure of education in the whole country, where majority of people, remember, mid-1800, 93% of the population of the world, especially in the Middle East, couldn't read or write.
Okay,
And-
so I got that part.
Okay.
The sentence right after that part is what I don't get. It says, while the nation has no need, whatever of various other superfluous studies, like you were just mentioning,
Right.
the point will, God willing, be developed in a second volume. And he says, I
Yeah.
hope that a reading of this first volume will produce fundamental changes in the thinking. So this first volume is Secret Divine Civilization. What is the second volume
think-
that he is referring to?
He may be, I'm not sure, but there is a Resale Siyasiye, Resale Madaniye. So this is basically, he may be referring to Resale Madaniye.
What does Rasaliya means?
Resale means the book, basically.
The book of Madaniya.
Madaniye means
So it's not published in English.
culture.
What's the other one?
The Resale Siyasiye means
Oh,
politics.
Politics.
This is the politics, and basically Madaniya means cultural.
Right,
So there's a second book that he wrote.
Right, there are two books, but I think both of them are in here when they translated it. I have
would
to
not
double
know.
check, I don't know.
But the other part which I didn't, which I mean I did understand, but I want to actually ask. It says, although in this world on the top of 107, individuals who are able to distinguish between sincere intentions and false words are as rare as the philosopher's stone, Yet we fix our hopes on the measureless bounties of the Lord. Is this something that he's saying is a constant? Is this a constant of humanity, or is this something that's relevant to the time?
Read it. See our hope that reading of this first volume will produce fundamental changes in thinking and the behavior of society. The question is that he needs to fix first behavior of society, of how to consult, how to manage the affairs of the political system, affairs of society through parliamentary system. And this was the beginning of the constitutional monarchy in Iran. Okay, so that's really what, now we have undertaken the work with a sincere intent and purely for the sake of God. It means that I have no horse in this race. I'm just describing reality of what other people have deployed, sciences, political system that they have instituted that works, and they have been, the civilization has progressed because of it. So he's saying, why aren't we, that were bastion of knowledge centuries ago, have been in this dilapidated position that nothing works? Education doesn't exist. Illiteracy doesn't exist. So he said that they have no other intent except for the sake of God, that I'm divulging all these realities for people to society to understand and apply. So that's what he's saying. Did you get the message?
Yes. And the next sentence only buttresses or reestablishes the same point you just said.
Yeah, there are some individuals, and it says there may be some individuals, it says, between sincere intention, because there may be people think that the author wanted to promote a political system, and he wanted to be the leader of that political system. You see what I'm saying? So his intentions were pure and had no benefit for himself. Whereas, for example, people that...
Because the next sentence says pretty much that there is no one in this world who's able to tell between sincere intentions and false words. What it's saying
correct.
here is that just like the philosopher's stone doesn't exist,
It's very rare.
well,
It
the
says
philosopher's
that-
stone doesn't
no.
exist. So
Right.
therefore, this person who can tell between false words and sincere intentions,
Intention, that's right.
likewise is non-existent.
Right.
So we're relying
yeah.
on God for you to believe me. That's effectively what I'm getting.
Right. Because remember, the whole process, who was he talking about? The ecclesiastical structure that were controlling the judiciary, they were controlling the political system with the descendant of the basically king, that were basically in control of the civil authorities. So the key really was that mentioning here that I'm not a political system and I'm not seeking any position and trying to change the society. I want to educate people that there are better ways of managing the society by basically adopting what inventions and branches of sciences that exist in the West, as well as the political system that yielded basically progress of material civilization in the West. And why aren't we using it? One of them was in education. Education where currently at the time people were studying or deliberating on actions related to hadith of what Muhammad did thousands of years, 1,000 years ago, 1,400 years ago, which had no relevancy in today's basically society. And deliberating one way or another has no purpose generally. And this is really the whole point of during the 12th century, Ghazali created a branch of Islam which was basically saying that all the knowledge that we need is in Quran and then 4 major Islamic book of traditions. Therefore, we don't need to expand or look for sciences or innovation outside the text, right? And from this 12th century, Islam tried to degrade. And ironically, the Renaissance started 14th to 17th century, where even the Islamic doctrine that was applied in Spain were learned by these European scholars, and those separation of church and state seeped back into Europe, and Europe, with, of course, using the old philosophy as well as separation of church and state, as well as basically philosophers like Descartes, where the Cartesian theory was brought in terms of dissipating that any material phenomenon on the earth has material source. And this concept changed, and it was basis of Renaissance. And of course, Luther came in and tried to shrink the hold of the ecclesiastical structure on the superstition that they were spreading. Gutenberg developed the printing press and the Bible, which was forbidden to read in 15th, 16th century. Then they propagated Bible, and people read the Bible and found out that in German, and there's nothing, the Bible has nothing to do with what the priests were telling them. So these are really key elements. And remember, you have to look at the Iran at the time was the most dilapidated, most backward, most superstitious, the poorest, least educated in the world. That's why Baha'u'llah came out of there. All right, so let's read on. The world.
The world of politics is like the world of man. He is seed at first, and then passes by degrees to the condition of embryo and fetus, acquiring a bone structure, being clothed with flesh, taking on his own special form, until at last he reaches the plane where he can befittingly fulfill the words, the most excellent of makers. Just as this is a requirement of creation and is based on the universal wisdom, the political world is the same way. Cannot instantaneously evolve from the nadir of defectiveness to the zenith of righteousness and perfection. Rather, qualified individuals must strive by day and by night, using all those means which will conduce to progress until the government and the people develop along every line from day to day and even from moment to moment.
Yeah, this is really interesting that there talks now in Iran and say, well, what if we bring in secularism to the society and change from this religious dictatorial model? And reality is that you can't flip it to secularism overnight, because those people that's supposed to excuse me, exercise the secularism are the same people that were believing in the old doctrine, and they were corrupted based on practices of the older or current regime. So this process if it would have not been disrupted by the clergy toward end of 18th century, when constitutional monarchy came to Iran, if the clergy wouldn't corrupt it, we wouldn't be in this position today. So if people would have basically studied what Abdul Baha mentioned, we would have developed those infrastructure of the political system that we wouldn't fall into the trap, or Persians wouldn't fall into the trap of the dictatorial religious dictatorship that exists today. But they're paying the price. You know, you go against the Holy Spirit, diffusion of the Holy Spirit in the society, which is the reality, and you pay the price, basically. And this is the price they're paying. One of the richest countries on earth, people are addicted, they have malnutrition, they have disease. It's just unbelievable. Half of the population, women, are getting discriminated against. And they deserve what they get because they chose it. They went against Baha'i doctrine, against the Holy Spirit. And there's a price to pay.
To an extent, though, the virus that they're dealing with right now, the severity of the effects of that outbreak is precipitated by these very violations.
Exactly. A good example of it is, now imagine why in Book of God, which is Aqdas, they say it's in the Holy Spirit, it's prevention from kissing the hand of the clergy. God knows thousands of people got infected because they were kissing the hands of those clergy people that were
Washing
in
themselves.
cahoot, not only washing themselves, in cahoot with those Chinese ayatollahs that brought the disease to them. Now imagine the propagation that could have happened, can happen, and has happened already. They're just putting a kibosh on it right now, but eventually you can't hide the
There was
bodies.
the Ukrainian plane that got shot down. That they only after Western officials discovered the shrapnel, they finally relented and agreed to. Oh yeah, we shot that down.
Yeah, it's corrupt.
That was only a month or two ago.
But look, you're talking about maybe a couple of hundred people. Here, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people are gonna get infected.
But those same lies, those same things on a large
Exactly.
level is now
But-
doing.
So that's
Yeah.
one thing. That's one thing. Even for economic and political reasons, they didn't quarantine home. So for 2 months or 3 months now, for 3 months, they were exporting this disease to all over the country because it's the center for people to come in for basically religious purposes.
And also have sex.
Of course.
And money.
Yeah, in Bahrain.
So the
in
economic,
Bahrain, they are sick because of Iran. People came back from Iran.
no, they're sick because
No, but they came back from Iran and then they got the
That's
coronavirus
right.
from Iran.
right.
So there was 2 people and now it's like 60.
Because they're Shiites.
Schools
That's
are
the
closed now.
reason.
Yeah.
In my
Yeah.
country, schools are
If they
closed.
weren't Shiite, they wouldn't be in problem.
Yeah.
Now, the second one that 1.34 billion Muslims are suffering from, in the Book of God, it says, do not eat with your hand. Why would, now imagine you have the guy sitting around the table and basically
Sharing germs.
sharing
The
germs
mosquito
and,
right now.
sorry?
The mosquito what is going around. It just
Yeah,
stung
I'm
her.
sensitive to mosquitoes.
No, I just got it.
Oh, you did?
I'm
Yeah, I
just
saw
sorry.
it flying around you. Flew to him.
No,
Flew to him.
I was the being.
Oh,
And it got him Mira.
No,
Sorry.
It was me.
The other way.
All right. So,
Coronavirus.
Yeah.
so now we see that why
one side.
why 1.4 billion Muslims are gonna be suffering because they're violating the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And imagine putting your hand in your mouth and then putting it back into the common dish and have everybody else. And you know the funny part, I thought it's education. These are not people that are educated. In United States, we have Pakistani and Indian friends. Pakistan is mostly Muslim, and India, some of the Indians
Shia
are
too.
friends. They're
Pakistani
mostly
Shia.
No, there's-
Sunnis, mostly.
Nothing.
But they're
I went
Shia,
to
they're
school
mixed.
with one.
99% they are.
I went to
don't
school
know.
with
Right.
one who
Anyways,
actually spread
anyways.
disinformation about the Baha'i faith when I was doing
Oh,
stuff.
they're corrupt. They're so corrupt. Because they think lying against infidels are sanctioned.
Well, he
This
flat
is
out
how-
told
Finish
me
your story, please.
in this country that it's okay
Right.
to kill Baha'is because they're preserving their religion. He said
No,
that
of
out
course,
loud,
of
and
course.
no one condemned him for saying those things in this country.
Right. So here, as you see, when you're looking at in United States, you had pathologists. Pathologists are MD, PhD. That means they have two. I mean, they're really
Smart.
High up.
high up, right? During the dinner, lunch that you're outside the house, right? Everybody's behaving normal. When they go home at their house, which they invited me, everybody eats by hand. This is United States of America.
Yeah. That's,
You see how culture, how strong it is, even supersede medical knowledge that they have.
It's not culture, it's being brainwashed to be a certain way since you were a child, which we call culture, but it's brainwashing, right? Because that's what you
Anyways.
think is right. It's the same.
Yeah, I was in Saudi Arabia. I was the only one. They had a big thing in the middle. Everybody sits on the floor. I was the only one that was eating with the fork and knife. I mean, fork and spoon.
what were
And
they
these are
eating?
pathologists. For God's sake, there were pathologists
What were
around
they
me.
eating?
Sorry?
What were they eating?
It's a rice with. It's
They're
a.
eating rice with their hands?
Yeah,
It's-
the bread.
No,
but
it's,
Really?
yeah.
they put
No,
it
they,
bread.
they take kid bread. Actually, they were pulling it into their own plate and
With
then
their
eating
hands.
it by hand.
Plunging
Yeah.
their hands into the
Yeah,
cup
yeah.
of bowl. And then
They pick the meats with their hands.
So needless to say, you went hungry that night.
No, I ate. You can't. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, you
If
can't-
you
you
don't
can't-
eat.
But you're gonna say, hold on, I go first.
No,
Now
See,
you-
the dish. There are actually
done that.
dishes that are small, but they would. So
Nice.
there were a spoon in those dishes,
Yes, yes.
but the way they eat it by hand.
so they had serving spoons. That's good.
They
At least
were
they did
serving
that.
spoon,
Okay.
but nobody except me was eating with the spoons.
How long ago was this?
You're such a.
Last
such a-
year. What do you
such
mean,
a-
how long
I'm just
ago?
checking, I'm just checking.
I'm not.
1880.
It was last night. I'm kidding.
December? We have a problem.
2 weeks
No.
incubation.
2 weeks.
Anyway, so let's
Wait,
read
it's a
on.
carrier.
So that's why you need, and I think, I was reading this. We have Gulzar Ta'lim Baha'i. It's the garden of Baha'i teachings, right? Which, and I was reading these things. And why?
Yeah, you can see it too.
What?
You get the mosquito
Yeah, yeah.
flying around your head.
Why don't you guys kill it?
I'm not gonna go and slap your head.
See the guy. You need 2 hands. You're gonna kill him.
No, actually,
Don't publish this
I
one.
actually have two.
Don't publish this one.
Jeremiah, there were no
You
mosquitoes.
have some
till you opened
editing
the
to do,
door. I just
Jeremiah.
want you to know that.
You have
You
some
lured
editing.
them in. I guess I did.
Yeah.
No, I don't see it. All right. Anyways,
He's gonna land right.
we finished. Okay. Next time.
Escape the mosquito.
Let
The
Bob
mosquito
know
is our
before we go.
alarm.
John, I
Yeah,
got the
this
first
raise
one.
something.
This is Risale Madaniya. There is Risale Siyasiya. But this one,
This is Risale what?
Madaniya,